Hey everyone, and welcome to my review of Kitaria Fables. This review is specific to the PS5 version, but it's also available on PS4, Xbox One, the Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, and PC. Although, wherever you decide to play the game, the only thing that will be different will be the performance options available to you. I should also mention that a review code was provided to me by the publisher. So then, for anyone who's new to the channel, the way I review games here is slightly different to the standard way of doing things. First, I'll give you the facts about the game, what it is, what it's all about, that kind of stuff. Then we'll go into the personal opinions on the positive and negative aspects of the game. Lastly, we'll end the video with a conclusion and recommendation section. And remember, if you enjoy this video or find it useful, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We're getting closer and closer to breaking that 1,000 subscriber milestone, so every single one of you really can make a difference. So what is Kitaria Fables? Well, it's an action RPG and farming sim hybrid that tries to implement both types of game in a roughly 50-50 split. You play as a humanoid cat, and as you might expect, most of the characters you'll meet in the game are also humanoid versions of other animals such as a rabbit, a tiger, or a polar bear. Throughout most of your time with the game, you'll be completing story quests and side quests for the various characters that inhabit the world. Completing quests will, of course, progress the story, but the side quests often unlock things that you can either buy or do. You'll also be fighting a load of monsters, exploring the world, collecting a ton of items, and in between all that, doing some farming to give you some income. Speaking of fighting monsters, in combat you'll have access to a sword, a bow, magic spells of various elements, weapon skills, and a dodge roll. You can use the sword by holding down the attack button instead of tapping it repeatedly like in a lot of other action RPGs, such as Diablo. The enemies do telegraph most of their attacks via a template on the ground so that you can accurately avoid it when necessary. Defeating enemies in the game does not grant you XP, and you aren't able to find other weapons out in the world, but you can upgrade the basic sword you begin with quite a few times in order to make it stronger. The same is true for the bow, but you can discover and craft some armor and accessories. These grant various bonuses to things like movement speed or physical defense, for example. The world you explore is separated into lots of smaller zones, which are all divided by a short loading screen. You'll see forests, deserts, snowy mountain paths, and of course a few towns here and there where you can buy food, upgrade your gear, and rest up. Very early on, you'll move into a small house where you can save the game, go to sleep to progress the time to the next morning, and change what type of cat you'd like to play as at the mirror in the corner. Just outside that house, you'll have access to a modest plot of land where you can grow some crops. Each crop takes a certain amount of in-game days to mature, after which you can sell them off for some profit in the overnight sales bin just outside your house. You will need to water them each morning to make sure they grow properly, unless it's raining of course, and if you need more water, you can refill your watering can at the nearby well. After being given the farmland, you'll also be given a selection of tools that will allow you to do things like chop down certain trees for wood, break certain stones for copper, iron and gold, and to harvest crops more efficiently. Most of these tools start off pretty weak, only allowing you to work one square at a time, but during the course of the game you'll be able to upgrade them. That will then enable you to work multiple squares at once, making everything you do on the farm much faster. In the menus there's a full suite of graphical options, at least in the PS5 version, and I would assume that some versions of the game may not have all of these, but you can change the FPS from 30 to 60 or even 120, assuming your TV or monitor can handle it, and the PS5 version does default to 4K 60 FPS, but you can tweak a lot of things including VSync, texture quality, and anti-aliasing. So I think that's about it for the basics of the game, and you should now have a decent idea of what it's all about. This is probably a good time to move into the personal opinion stuff. Please keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list and doesn't include every single positive or negative point, it's just the main ones that really stood out to me personally. So the first positive point that I want to mention is that the game allows you much more freedom than similar games of the same genre. In other games, you generally have an energy meter which governs how much you can do in one day. Usually, if you stay out too late, slaying monsters or tending to your farm, the game will make you pass out or something similar and force you back home. In Kitaria Fables, there isn't any restriction, so if you want to stay out for 2 nights straight without going to sleep, you can do that, which for me was a nice change. I don't really have a problem with it in other games necessarily, but it is nice to play one that doesn't have that mechanic for a change. For me, the design and visual art style suit this type of game very well. The character illustrations that pop up when you talk to the NPCs are really well drawn and just really clean looking in my opinion. I do actually enjoy pixel art in this genre with games like Stardew Valley for example, but sometimes when they move to 3D they just don't kinda look right, or perhaps the developers just aren't up to the task. In Kitaria's case though, I genuinely really like the visuals and the overall presentation of virtually everything in the game. It's the attention to detail that really drives this point home for me. For example, at night you'll see fireflies dancing around the street lamps, when you pass a waterfall you'll see a small rainbow, and when it rains, the visual effects mixed with the sound design really sold the fact that it was raining. The sound even changes when you're inside a building but it's raining outside. It's very well done in my opinion. Throughout my time with the game, I thought that the combat was quite enjoyable. I said this in my early preview video as well, but due to the way the combat system was built, I always felt engaged in it. I think that because the enemies use that attack template on the floor and because the dodge has iframes, you'll feel like you're a much more active participant in the fight. Early on, a small group of enemies can very quickly kill you if you're not careful, so you do need to be paying attention. Having said that, there isn't really a penalty for dying, but it does send you back to your house and progress time to the next morning, so that is something to bear in mind. Overall though, the combat isn't anything revolutionary, but it works, it's solid, and I found it rather engaging. Lastly, in this section I'd like to mention the music. I've said this before, but music in general isn't something that bothers me too much in games. There's only a few games whose music has really stuck with me over the years, things like Shenmue or Ghost of Tsushima for example, but I do give it a listen when I do my reviews. I mean, after all, someone somewhere worked hard on it, and I believe in giving credit where credit is due. I found the music in this game to be very easy to listen to and very well suited to the genre. Have a quick listen to this. When I first heard this, I was instantly reminded of the music from the first Lord of the Rings movie, particularly the Shire scenes from the beginning. Might just be me, but like the combat, I also thought this was well done. So now, unfortunately, this is the section where I have to be a little harder on the game than I have been up to this point. Let's talk about some negatives. So firstly, this is going to be quite a big one, and it's kinda weird because it could be very bad indeed, or it could actually be a load of nothing. So let me explain. I got to a certain point in the game quite near the end, and I haven't been able to progress past it, at least at the time of recording this review. The game doesn't have a minimap nor any directional quest markers. The only thing it does have is a little symbol that appears above an NPC's head or on the main map when a quest is present. Currently, I have 0 markers anywhere in the game and no quest in the quest log. I literally went to every zone and town on the map and looked around for ages and just couldn't find any way to progress. Now, as I said, this could be a very, very bad bug that breaks progression, which is a serious issue, or it could literally just be that I've missed something somewhere and it's my fault for not seeing it. The problem comes from the fact that I simply can't tell you which one it is, and because I'm playing an early copy of the game, I don't really have anywhere to turn for answers. The game did have one patch during the review period, but it doesn't seem to have changed anything, and I just don't really know what to say about it. But again, let me be clear, it could be a huge game-breaking bug, but it could also be me not realizing I need to do something that just wasn't obvious to me. I will be reaching out to the developers for information, and if I hear anything, I'll make a quick follow-up video to let you all know the situation. The second negative point I want to bring up is that the game will release with quite a few microtransaction DLC items. Now granted, they're all only about 79p or around $1 each, but considering that they're just skins for your cat or skins for the accessories themselves, I feel like they should have just been in the game already and not cost anything extra, especially because they'll release on day one with the game. They have literally been set aside to be sold separately, and it just feels a little bit, I don't know, scummy to me. What I would have done is included them in the game as standard unlocks, and then depending on how well the game sold, produce small DLC expansions, which could include, you know, new areas to visit, new weapons to get, new cosmetics, and perhaps a small story. You could then charge maybe £10 or $10 for it. Of course, this isn't the biggest deal in the world and probably won't be a deal breaker for most people, but I do believe it's worth knowing. And I think the last negative I could mention is partly taken from another point I made earlier. The quests in and of themselves are perfectly fine, but the game really does need, in my opinion, some kind of quest marker or at least a minimap so that you can see where things are. It just felt kinda cumbersome sometimes to be told a quest is in a certain location, but then you have to kind of walk around the area searching for it. In my opinion, it would just help the experience if you had a way to see where your objective is a bit more clearly. Or perhaps if you select a quest in your quest log, the game will guide you to that area via a small on-screen arrow or something like that. Again, not a huge deal, but if there was something like that in the game, it may have helped me progress from the part I'm stuck at. there could easily be a small obscure area that I've just not checked, or a character somewhere that I need to talk to trigger the next quest. But I just don't know because I currently have no markers and nothing in the menus to tell me what to do next. I should point out though that I would assume the game will receive a day one patch that may fix any and all issues, so I'll check that out myself, and if the situation changes, I'll be sure to let you all know. And I think that's about it for the negative section, so let's move on to the conclusion and recommendation. I think the game really tries to be two simple games in one package. Half action RPG and half farming sim, but it does them both in a very basic and easy to understand way. Now, of course, that could be taken in a few different directions. You could say that both sides of the game are simple, solid, and they all work as they should, but you may also think that because it splits the game into two halves, it does neither of them very well. I suppose, like many things, it completely depends on your viewpoint, but for me personally, I lean more to the side of the game being perfectly enjoyable as it is, and yes, it is simple, but it's very well made for the most part. Of course, there is that possibility of the progression bug that I mentioned, but at this time it's very hard to confirm, so that makes this one a bit difficult to recommend until I know for sure. Having said that, it doesn't really feel like it's a bug to me. It feels more like something I'm missing due to the game's lack of direction when it comes to quest locations. But the all-important question is, would I recommend it? Well, I mean, if you put aside the possibility of that bug, then yeah, I would generally recommend this game to any fan of the genre. It's not a mind-blowing experience, but it is a solid game, and I found the vast majority of it to be very enjoyable. I think it looks nice, sounds good, and plays well. It's got plenty of content to keep you going for well over 20-25 hours, especially if you're taking it casually. And it is an indie game, so the price is fairly reasonable. Then again, if you're someone who's looking for the next Stardew Valley, this probably isn't going to fill that void. That's not to say that the game wouldn't be enjoyable to you, but you do have to keep in mind that it's very simple in pretty much all aspects. For me, that was actually a benefit, and I liked that it was more basic than other games in the genre. But generally, I think the hardcore fans of these types of games like to have as much depth in them as possible. While the game is solid, as I said, it does lack that depth, so do keep that in mind. If, on the other hand, you're just a casual player of games in general and you're open to trying most genres, then honestly you could do far worse than this game. I'm not a huge fan of farming sims myself, even though I do like them, but I am a fan of action RPGs, so that side of it spoke to me a bit more than the farming stuff did and helped me enjoy the game overall. Having said that, my missus is a massive fan of farming sims and she's easily got over 1,000 hours in Stardew Valley, but when she watched me play this, she wasn't really that interested in it and decided not to buy it, so I think that fact may tell you all you need to know. But there you go, that's my review of Kitaria Fables, a basic but enjoyable action RPG farming sim hybrid that I think needs a few updates to truly shine. As far as I can see, the game is roughly £30 in the UK and $40 in the US, at least for the physical editions. It's also worth noting that the game does not have a physical release on the Xbox consoles, but it does for the PS4, PS5 and Nintendo Switch. I also did a bit of research, and in the UK the game says it has a September 2nd release date, but on Amazon for the US it says the 3rd. So if you are interested in this game, make sure to check the release dates for where you are in the world. I hope I covered everything that you wanted to know about the game in this review, but if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate it, and if you want to help support the channel, all the important links are in the video description down below. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.